Alright guys, so today we're going to talk about what actually happened at the LA riots, and they were riots. These were not peaceful protests by any stretch of the imagination. I was there, and I was on the ground for every single night except the first. Since I wasn't there, we will leave the first night out. Here's what happened. I first arrived around 6 p.m. This was during the Paramount/Compton riot. By the time I got there, the riot was no longer around Home Depot in Paramount. It had moved across the bridge into Compton. When I got there had been several fires lit, and the streets were completely taken over. A car had been stolen and completely burned and vandalized to bits. The protesters were using it to shoot fireworks off of. They were dancing on top of it, pushing it into the middle of an intersection with their trucks, and then doing donuts around it in the middle of the street. Donuts, cookies, whatever you want to call them. They were also doing burnouts. The police line was up the street quite a bit from Dale's Donuts. The rioters were using dumpsters as sort of shields to push closer and closer to the police line. Call of Duty World at War style. As they pushed up closer and closer to the police lit them up. They shot flashbang after flashbang after flashbang right over these guys' heads. They eventually retreated and the police moved in. They established a line at the Dale's Donuts.
Come on, we got the ambulance! Go, the ambulance! Whoa! Let's bang! Go! I'm right here.
What is that? What's that van?
I don't know, just start right last time, running too.
At this point, the rioters now had a strip mall and a gas station. So naturally, they immediately looted the gas station. And they picked this place clean. Any tobacco products, gone. The register drawer, gone. Behind the register, completely trashed. They were stealing alcohol, snack, whatever they felt like selling or having in that moment. It's funny, I actually saw rioters with girls, like guys with girls, and they would say, "Oh, what do you want to drink?" And then they'd walk into the gas station and steal something for the girl. "Oh, I'll take a twisted tea." Walks over to the gas station, grabs his girl a twisted tea. It's on the house. Disgusting behavior. There were people pulled up to the gas station with their cars, loading boxes of alcohol into the backs of their cars. Eventually, protesters came out with chicken wire, and they stretched it from one side of the street to the other as a sort of defense against the police. This went on for hours. The police just stood where they were. It was a long time, well into the early hours of the morning. What was very astonishing is the protesters thought that if they were at the gas station, it was a safe haven because the police can't shoot at the gas station. But they did. It was shocking. I couldn't believe it. They were shooting flashbang after flashbang directly at the pumps. And when I say directly at the pumps, I don't mean they were hitting the ground in front of the pumps. They were hitting above the pumps. I mean, they were hitting the pumps. And these flashbangs, they spark. They tell you can't even smoke a cigarette while you pump your gas. That's one of a couple things that the police did at the LA riots that I thought was somewhat questionable. The rioters wanted to catch the palm trees on fire, so they were shooting fireworks at the palm trees. They were also shooting fireworks from the gas station and at the gas station. Again, idiotic behavior. Of course, they were also shooting fireworks at the police. Eventually, in the early hours of the morning, the police did clear the Compton riot. They pushed everyone down the street. They used pepper balls, they used gas, they used flashbangs until everyone was out. I went home and got some sleep. The next day, this was Sunday, and this was by far the most violent day. The protest began at City Hall at 2 p.m. There were thousands of people, and just before 3 p.m., they moved over to the VA outpatient clinic, where they gathered en masse. The police formed some lines, and at some point, a small amount of officers were going to leave. They got in their cruisers and started moving. But what did the protesters do? Well, of course, they blocked the vehicles, which is a crime. The police announced that they better move or they would start indiscriminately arresting people. That didn't work out so well. The rioters began throwing glass bottles at the police, plastic water bottles full of water, and other objects. The police started retreating. They started moving back. So much for the arrests. One person threw something at the windshield of one of the cruisers and smashed it. It spiderweb. That was at 2:51.
Maintain some discipline! We're not attacking you! Fuck you! Get the fuck out of here! Get the fuck out of here!
At 3:20, a black police cruiser rolled through this same crowd, and it was completely demolished. They smashed as many windows as they could get. They beat on the front and the back of it until it was destroyed. And there was somebody inside of it driving. These two incidents were the first major escalations that led to the rest of the violence.
Keep going, keep going, keep going. I fucking blew it. They're killing everybody on that side. Cross the street. Keep going, keep going.
And to be very clear, that escalation did not come from the police. At this point, the police started using rubber bullets, pepper balls, and flashbangs. And mind you, this is still broad daylight. It's just after 3 p.m. By 4:02, the streets were completely taken over. At 5:13, the federal building a block away was taken over completely. The front of it was completely defaced. At 5:16, they moved more down the street and lit a Waymo on fire. A Waymo is an autonomous self-driving electric vehicle. The emissions made from burning one are highly toxic and cancer-causing. Most people were not wearing a gas mask. I thankfully was. But that didn't mean I didn't accidentally inhale some fumes here and there. These Waymos were in sort of a line. There were 5 of them stopped behind each other. They didn't know how to move through the crowd. At 5:30, as the rioters watched the first Waymo burn, they lit the second one on fire. And eventually, they would light all 5, emitting massive amounts of highly toxic chemicals into the air, putting every single person who was present at risk, including people who were just passerbys. These Waymos were disintegrated. There was nothing left of them. Those lithium-ion batteries burn at extreme temperatures. They were melted to the asphalt. Puddles of their former selves. At 6:09 is where things really got violent. California Highway Patrol pulled in. They showed a massive force with huge amounts of police cruisers under the underpass, or driving on the freeway under the underpasses. At that point, I was posting on Twitter. I thought we were saved. I thought it was over. But that wasn't the case, because the protesters had the overpass. They started smashing the sidewalks with hammers, getting big pieces of concrete, and there were also pallets of bricks all over the place. Very suspicious. They took those bricks and chunks of the sidewalk and dropped them on moving police cruisers on the freeway below the overpass. At 6:11, this was already declared an unlawful assembly, but things had just gotten a lot worse. It is amazing to me that the things they did to the cars on the freeway below them did not cause a mass casualty event. The California Highway Patrol was stranded under the underpasses. They weren't able to leave. If they did, they were likely to catch a brick to the head. At 7:30, they began lighting tinder and pieces of cardboard and throwing it off the overpass onto the police cruisers below, lighting them on fire. That was emitting toxic fumes to the officers under that overpass. That's where they were stranded. The officers used fire extinguishers to attempt to put the fires out. As they stepped out, they were hit in the head with bricks. They were throwing everything off this overpass, targeting the cruisers or officers below. Bricks, pieces of the sidewalk, regular rocks, lime scooters, bikes, whatever they could get their hands on. Anything that wasn't nailed down. At this point, the streets were in complete chaos. Fires were being lit everywhere. At 8:11, CHP regrouped. They came on horseback, which I thought was completely irresponsible. All it takes is one horse bucking you off and you have a dead officer. And then if that horse is spooked, what if it runs into the crowd? Now you have a bunch of dead rioters. That's not going to look good or be good for anyone. Immediately as the horseback officers pulled in, fireworks were thrown at them. There was a direct hit in the group of officers on horseback, which caused the horses to buck up and back off. No officers fell off that I saw, luckily. They continued to move in, shooting rubber bullets. Another firework was thrown, another direct hit. Again, luckily nobody fell off their horse. But those horses and those officers were definitely injured. There's no way around it. These are massive fireworks. I think they thought they were dispersing the protesters, getting them to leave. But in reality, they just dispersed further around the city, where they lit even more fires in dumpsters, on parking kiosks. They robbed those parking kiosks. The cash register drawers being strewn all over the place.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back where we were. Oh, it's damaged.
They lit bushes on fire, shrubs, garbage cans, bigger dumpsters. They lit one dumpster on fire near a gas station, and when the police pulled in, they had another direct hit with a firework. The cops got back in their cars and left.
Between the protesters and the police here. The police have formed a line here, and now they're evacuating. They are evacuating from the area. The fire department is unable to make way. The dumpster is on fire, and you saw a fire up.
Surrendering the streets to the protesters. This is because Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles wouldn't allow them to do their jobs. My colleague Aldo Bottazzoni asked an officer why they weren't doing more, and they told him that they were allowed to act in self-defense in the immediate, but weren't allowed to do anything more. And those orders came from above. They were spray painting moving buses, throwing rocks at police cruisers, any opportunity that they got. At one point, another journalist and I were sitting on one of the on-ramps, and some police cruisers came down. I don't know if you've ever seen Hacksaw Ridge, but the scene where sort of the new guys, the fresh guys, are coming in and they're all, trimmed and clean and they look fine. And the guys that were just up on Hacksaw Ridge are coming down and they're beaten, bloodied, and battered. That is what these cruisers looked like. Every single one of them had slashed tires. Their windshields were spider-webbed. Many of them were dented up. Completely destroyed. The police continued to attempt to repel people. There was a really big push at the end of the night after some more dumpster fires and some more rock throwing at cop cars, moving vehicles. There was a lot of tear gas. I got gassed myself. There was a lot of rubber bullets, a lot of pepper balls, and a lot of flashbangs. At this time, I was actively being hunted by the anti-Israel mob. They were tracking my posts. I didn't know it for most of the day, and I was actually live at some points. Luckily, several other journalists and an informant let me know. I didn't post much for the rest of the night, and I had to hire security for the next day. The next day rolled around, and I had my bodyguards. But things would change on Monday. The protesters were doing an optics check now. They would put their hands up in the air any chance they got and chant peaceful protest. Why are you in riot gear? There is no riot here. See, the National Guard were on scene now. The protesters were waving American flags now, not just Mexican flags. This was an organized effort. It was intentional. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I will put this out here, a series of observations. On Sunday, the most violent day of all, the one that I told you about just before, I saw maybe one, maybe two arrests. Very few. The people who burnt the Waymos got off scotch-free. People who were throwing rocks at the police cruisers in the immediate were not arrested. But on Monday, when the protesters did an optics change, they started waving American flags for optics. They actually acted mostly peaceful. When somebody would throw a water bottle at the police, which is something that in the prior day you wouldn't even bat an eye at. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of water bottles and fireworks thrown at the police, and glass bottles. When somebody would do that on Monday, they would be chased away by the crowd, told don't do that, this is a peaceful protest.
Every American flag, the nice clean twist. It's all like such a...
Right here. Why would you throw that?
On that day, the police decided to arrest everyone, which is exactly what the protesters wanted. They want to be arrested for a legitimately peaceful protest. What were they arrested for? Being out past curfew, which is the lowest offense they could have possibly committed. On Monday, everyone was kettled, which is a tactic where the police start at both ends of the street. They move in slowly but surely. They use munitions if needed, and then they wrap around to the building side, and they slowly close everyone in. They then systematically arrest everyone in the kettle. I was in that kettle. I was detained, questioned, as was my bodyguard. I showed my credentials and I was let go. But my question is, why were the orders on the most violent day of all only defend yourself in the immediate, but the orders on the most peaceful day of all were arrest anyone and everyone? Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's not. Tuesday was pretty much the same thing. As soon as the curfew kicked in, everyone outside of the federal building was kettled and arrested. I was again caught in the kettle. I was again let go, but everyone else was arrested and taken in. The streets were locked down on Tuesday. If you were out past 8 o'clock, you were going to jail. There was a show of force like I have never seen. After they kettled everyone, they slowly moved out from the federal building and pushed everyone out of downtown. There were small pockets of riots around the city, but eventually they were completely dispersed with very little resistance. Later in the night, opportunists used the situation to loot an Apple store and an Adidas store, but other than that, there was no incident. I left on Wednesday. I came back to Seattle and I covered the riots here. That's going to be the next video. Stay tuned. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment what you thought of this down below, and join the Discord linked in the description if you enjoy talking about these issues or debating them with other people. All are welcome, regardless of your position on the riots, whether you love Trump, hate Israel, hate Israel, it doesn't matter. All are welcome in the Discord. I'll see you there.